Why, hello again there, YouTube. Yes, it's me, Cipher, and thanks for joining the Devil's Advocates Debate Club once again on this beautiful morning. I would like to make a quick announcement before getting into the video proper. We do have our first debate upcoming. Yes, I have actually been challenged. I think for now I'll leave the subject of mystery to those of you who aren't reading all of my comments, but you can find the answer if you really want. Anyway, though, I am super excited about my first debate topic and am already preparing. I actually know what the topic is, but not what side my opponent will be arguing, so it's given me a great opportunity to prepare an argument for both sides of my first debate. Anyway, I'm really excited. I hope you are as well. Today, though, with as little camera shaking as possible, and hoping that the water is not too loud, I'd like to talk just a little bit about the service animal issue, and specifically service dogs. Now, I live in America, so I will be speaking of American laws. I understand things are actually quite different in other parts of the world, and I've been looking into that a little bit recently. But today's video will focus on what I know, which is, well, the ADA and a little bit of the American Legal Code. See, in America, basically all service animal, or especially service dog regulation, comes from the Adults with Disabilities Act, or ADA. And it's actually a pretty short section. I suggest anyone interested in the subject read it, because it's rather telling. Most people I talk to on the subject of service dogs are under the impression that service animals have to carry some form of identification. A vest of sorts is generally what people think of for the dogs. This is not the case. Legally, service dogs are required to carry no form of identification whatsoever, and there's been an ongoing argument about whether or not this should continue to be the case. See, the Adults with Disabilities Act was written for and primarily by disabled people, or at least with their consultation very, very firmly in mind, and as such, it gives them a lot of rights without very many responsibilities. Now, it was intended to help these people out, and for the most part, I support what it's done. But there are definitely questions I have, especially with what's been going on airlines recently when it comes to, say, people with allergies versus people with service dogs. Currently, as it stands for most major airlines, I'm going off of the Wikipedia pages, I'll admit here, but as far as I can tell, even looking into the company's background policies, companies don't require people with service animals to let them know ahead of time that they're showing up with a dog. In fact, it's illegal for them to do so. However, they can require people with allergies to state their allergies. So if you have a deadly allergy and want to fly, but, well, are afraid of being put next to a dog, you have to have a doctor's note within 10 days of the flight. So not just a doctor's note saying that you have deadly allergies, one that's less than 2 weeks old. Personally, I would like to see things be a little bit more even in our legal code. So I definitely think there needs to be a way for both sides to hold some responsibility, or at least for it to be a little bit easier to prove that you have a deadly allergy, especially since year by year they don't tend to get any less deadly. Now, one of the things that would immediately be necessary if we start regulating service dogs in almost any way would be an identification process. This would require whatever governmental sector was handling it to know what the people's disabilities were. So or at least to know that they are disabled. And most of the disabled people I've talked to have been afraid that if any sort of registry is formed, it will end up surpassing their information rights. So in other words, the government will end up taking a bunch of their medical records that they otherwise wouldn't have a right to, just to prove that this person needs a service dog. However, my debate group and I have discussed this at length, and I personally see no reason why it couldn't be simpler. Something like a doctor's note stating that you have a disability requiring this animal. Currently, if you take a service dog or even just a pet into a business, the only things that they're allowed to ask are what the service dog is trained to do, and if it is a service dog, you can just lie and take your pet into most stores. Now, of course, there are theoretically repercussions for doing so in the legal code. It's illegal to lie about having a service animal, but unless you turn yourself into the police, there's currently no recourse for catching these people. Another complaint I've seen from both sides is that emotional support animals and people who have them have started jockeying for position as service animals, and they are two very different things. An emotional support animal doesn't have to be trained to do any particular task. It's literally just something you carry kind of like a teddy bear to make yourself feel better. And while I'm perfectly fine with the concept, I think the legal backing of the lady who was trying to take her emotional support peacock onto an airplane might be a little bit shaky. However, if they had emotional support animals registered as service animals, if they were ever to be considered the same thing, well, this distinction would go away and your emotional support peacock might be allowed on the plane. I might sound hyperbolic with the emotional support peacock. I bring that up because, for those of you who aren't aware, this is an actual case. And the airline refused to let this woman on with her peacock, and she was very upset. Well, service dogs, as it currently sits, also aren't required to be well behaved. In that, if a service dog is barking or defecating in a store manager can ask them to leave. But beyond that, there are no regulations for, well, making sure that a service dog is ready to be in public. I envision something along the lines of a driver's test. I mean, you get a license to drive a car. I see no reason why you shouldn't have a license to have a 200-pound, muscle-bound animal out in public with you. Now, since the biggest fear from the disabled community on the registry issue seems to be having their specific disabilities revealed to the government, as opposed to just a more general disabled status, I think that service dogs should be tested for their basic ability to be in public without causing a ruckus, I suppose. And there are already such canine citizen tests, but these are run by corporations who, honestly, in my experience with them, might not have the disability, the best in mind for the disabled people. I think they're more out for a profit, and that having something like a DMV driver's test, but for your dog, run by the government with actual standards, would really help with the public fear some people have of service dogs, and really just help the industry as a whole. Now, this might be something that I'm taking sides on a little bit here on my channel, but it's not so much as I'm taking a side as that I've seen two very, very stuck in their ways sides that I've dealt with for many, many years, and I'm trying to find a middle ground. My debate group has discussed this at length, so some of the views on this topic will be theirs, not mine. But it's something that more and more individual people don't seem to think is a problem or a discussion that's being had at all, despite the fact that in 2018, at least 28 different states passed new legislation on the subject because, well, people are starting to get fed up with the industry and its absolute lack of standards. I don't think that we should, as I have seen some people suggest, rewrite the entire ADA. I think that that would be a very dangerous thing to do, as most sections of it work quite well. However, I do think that laws requiring some form of identification or just some responsibility to any side on the service dog community or this disabled community as a whole, well, it might make things seem just a little bit more fair. And I know, for a lot of these people, it's not fair that they're disabled. It's not fair that they're in the position to begin with. And as a community, I definitely think it's important for us to reach out and help them. But it's also important for us to make sure that all of our citizens are treated justly and equally. And when we start giving too many special considerations to a group just because they are less well off than us in one way or another, and yes, I know some people might accuse me of being ableist here, but we can't just give any group everything. There have to be, if not limitations, regulations. And currently that's missing from our service dog industry pretty much entirely. Anyway, this has been a bit of a ramble. I'll do a more scripted or at least a video with notes on the subject at a later date. As I mentioned, it's one that's very important to my discussion group, to my chat group. But I was bored, wanted to film a video, and thought I'd get a few of our starting thoughts out there. Also, I hope you've enjoyed the river as much as I do. I come out here and sit quite frequently to think about the insanity of our era. Anyway, as you know by now, I'm Cipher. And thanks again for watching the Devil's Advocates Debate Club.